All right, welcome everyone. It's Monday, August 16th. And yeah, I just needed to sigh for a moment there. But welcome everyone to this round of part 3 of Wholistic H and WH toolkits. Basically, hopefully you're learning some ways to support your immune system and really minimize the impact in your body with the COVID. I think it's basically everywhere. So we all need to be very much aware of how to navigate this. And you are responsible for your own health, and you're also capable of healing. Those are two things that are very important to remember. And not to feel like it's out of your own control, or not even control, but I think it's empowering to know that there's so much you can do. And I think that's the whole point of our work that we do, is to empower all of you and to really tap into that truth that you can heal yourself. You can maintain your own immunity of your immune system, your own capabilities, your possibilities, what you're here to express. That's really something you can be in contact with, in relationship with. This is not something that you need to wait till you're sick to take care of, or once you're sick, you begin to scramble to work on yourself. It's a daily practice. That's what health means, is to really attend to your wholeness every single day. So I hope you've been doing some of that. And hopefully some of you have started to feel the positive impacts of hydration and checking your zinc level. And if you're new to this, then you definitely want to listen to the last 2 calls that we did this month about the hydration, potassium, and zinc. And to start with, I am going to have Chris take us through some grounding work. There's a lot going on in the world, as always, and particularly this weekend, and what's going on in the weather patterns have been impacting my hometown in Japan. We are getting, like, we're talking 3 meters of rain, which is like double the length of me. And that's a tremendous amount of rain that there's no way that the soils, the mountains, the forests can absorb that much rain in such a short period of time. So lots of mudslides. And also in Haiti, after the 7.3 earthquakes, they're dealing with now with the rain also. So, and individually, we have a lot going on weather fronts, with Colorado being exposed to a lot of the smoke, and many of you probably are struggling with that as well, the air quality. So, and just the recent news about the global warming and how dire this is. I'm sure it's impacting many of your hearts. And, you know, I am deeply concerned about it. So I thought maybe we can come together, ground ourselves. We can be the individual trees that are connected through the wide network of the, the root system, but also fungi. And if you haven't watched that amazing, fun documentary and informative documentary on the fungi on the Netflix, I recommend that you watch that. And it's called, what is it? The Amazing Fungi. I think that's what it was called.
Amazing or fantastic?
Fantastic. It was actually Fantastic Fungi. So if you haven't watched that on Netflix, I would highly recommend, and see how we're all very much connected. And so the next time you walk the forest, or notice after the rain, the little mushrooms are coming out of the ground, you will just worship that. And hopefully we can all become a little bit of a, bow down to the mushrooms and be grateful to the networks that they are creating for all of us as well. And also, just, I think it's worth it for us sensitives and empaths and intuitives and channelers. All of us are very in tune with the energetic fields, but not to completely shut the information. I think there's a limit to how much information you can take, how much news you want to be exposing yourself to. But I'm also coming from my undergrad was on political science, international affairs, and I always wanted to work for UN, actually, for the UN. So, learning multiple languages and living in multiple countries, I am always interested in international affairs. And what's going on in Afghanistan is very, very dire and very scary. So if you could just take a moment and recognize, first of all, how fortunate you are to be able to come to this call and take the time to learn and to support yourself, and to recognize that there are people that are really, it's every day every moment they're having to focus on, am I going to be here this moment to next moment? It's that dire. So I think that's also important to keep in mind. So I wanted to say those things before we get started. And I would welcome all your prayers to my family members and my cousins and all the extended friends and families are going through major rain storms in Japan, if you could. So I'll pass it to Chris.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to say a big thank you to Masami for really taking on the lion's share of preparing for these calls. And so even though, I participate and I still see myself as somewhat of the sidekick, because she really does put in so much work to pull these together. And so I just wanted to recognize her for that. So what I'm going to do is just have us settle in for a moment. We've talked a bit about this before, about how important it is to experience stillness to help reset your nervous system. I know for me, I can be a little bit of a news junkie when it comes to reading the news, not much for watching it, but I'll read it. And I know a lot of people are finding themselves a little bit scattered or overstimulated right now because of screen time and that dopamine popping effect of being on social media or reading news stories with everything that's happening right now. So for me, I know it's had at least a little bit of an exhausting effect. My body is going through something of a detox at the moment today, and I can feel the energy toll that's requiring. So I want to just recognize where we are externally in the world with all of those things Masami mentioned and more, all the fires burning everywhere. I mean, it's across continents. And so there's so many things at play right now. So let's settle in and find a still place where you can sit quietly, find your breath. And I encourage you to breathe slowly through your nose, in through your nose. Try to extend that breath a little bit. And then also exhale through your nose slowly and extend that breath 5-6 seconds or so. So just find that rhythm, slowing it down, and give a moment to the world in pain and suffering right now. So many things happening, fires burning of all kinds. Feel into that collective experience. These things that have ripples that impact all of us. And if you can, if you have a little extra to spare, send love and support, even if you can't be there in person. But really feel that expression outward in support of all of these people who are suffering and struggling right now. whether they're refugees from weather events, climate events, political events, whatever's happening. And from there, I invite you to turn your attention inward. We're going to look at something that oftentimes we ignore, which is our inner domain of sensory information that helps us to know what's happening inside of our bodies and to have ways that we can respond meaningfully and supportively to whatever is coming up in our bodies. And the way we're going to do this for the next couple minutes is to find our pulse. First, just to make it simple, I want you to find it on your wrist, just below your thumb, in the little hollow below the wrist bone. You can put some light pressure there. It's one of the easy places to find it. And if not there, you can find it on the left or right side of your neck, just below the corner of your jawbone. Just notice, is it beating fast? Is it beating slowly? Does it feel relaxed? Does it feel intense? Notice the quality of that pulse. Continue that slow breathing. But now I'm going to add one more instruction, which is to follow the beat of your own pulse and to time your breathing with that pulse. To begin with, I want you to try whatever is comfortable for you, whatever is natural for you on the inhale. It might be 4 beats or 6 beats or 8 beats even. But inhale for that number of beats that's comfortable for you, and then exhale for the same number of beats, and continue doing that evenly for a few cycles of breath. So it might be something like this: inhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and repeat. Now, gradually, with that same instruction of counting your breath with your heartbeat, go ahead and relax your hands. Maybe put them in your lap or on your thighs, just relaxed. And we're going to continue to match our breath with our heartbeat. But now it's time to notice a little more subtlety and see if you can feel that heart beating, maybe in your chest, maybe in your fingertips, wherever your hands are relaxed and resting. See if you can find it again without your fingers on your pulse. And continue a few more cycles of that, counting the breath with the beats of your heart. If you find yourself struggling to connect with your heart beating or your pulse without touching one of the pulse points that I mentioned earlier, that's okay. See if you can find another signal in your body that helps you find something like your heart beating and work with that. Might be very subtle. Let's do just 2 or 3 more cycles of counting your breath with your heartbeat. And as we finish, you might whisper to yourself, like we've practiced previously, I am here. This is what your heart is telling you. I am here. Here with everything, whether we asked for it or wanted it. It doesn't matter because it's what is here. And we're here with it. So let's be here fully. And slowly bring your attention back to your seat and the rest of your body. Maybe move a little bit, roll your shoulders, move your neck. And maybe let out a sigh. I know I've got one waiting to come out that just happened. And let's come on back to, hand it back to Masami.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciated that, actually. I needed that. I'm sure many of you felt that. Coming back, coming home. And pulse is probably one of the best ways to get back in touch with your body. So use that tool that Chris just shared with you as often as you can. It was very helpful for me too. So thank you for all of you for participating in that. And this is kind of the bottom-up practice that we talk about, right? There's so much kind of a practice that is the top-bottom, top-down practice. So much like a visualization and so much of you going out of your body to practice stillness or meditation that is always about taking you out of this body into the cosmic energy. There's merit to that. There are times you want to do that. But I think more than ever before, this is the time you come home to this body a little bit more and attend to the needs of the body so that you can continuously move forward with your soul contract, because your soul is housed by your body, which I have said many, many times. And Chris and I have been talking about doing maybe Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon workshop on bridging the spirit and soul. So we're working on that, and we'll let you know. I'll send you the emails to everyone, and I'll announce it on the next Monday call as well. I hope you can sign up. We're thinking that maybe it would be good to really introduce you to some of these practices that you bridge and connect the spirit and soul. And you might be thinking, well, what's the difference between soul and spirit? But there's some differences, and we get split. And I feel like that's what's happening in the society as well, with so much kind of the divisions and oppositions and polarizations, and we're not hearing each other, and we're basically blaming one another for this or that, or we're distrusting one another, and we're fearful. We're becoming very fearful. And that's when our internal system starts to split as well. So I'm seeing more and more cases where the spirit and the soul are not quite communicating within yourself, or the soul needs to be heard, but it just doesn't have the arena to be heard. And the spirit's basically saying, well, I don't seem to be able to come into your physiology to dance with the soul. So I think, I believe I'm a strong believer of what's outside is what's inside. So many of our bodies are riddled with inflammation. There's fire going on inside. But then we are flooded with information, and flooded with sadness, and flooded with grief and unresolved traumas. And, we are expressing what's going on outside as well. So it is important that we take the time to connect back into our soul and your spirit, and to be a little bit more aware of not even just a nuanced difference, but there are distinctive differences between these two elements, two things that you come into this world with. So we hope to share that with all of you. And I know we need to get into our topic today, but I just wanted to say thank you to so many of you that emailed us and shared your thoughts about the Monday calls. And so that really energized us. Thank you so much. And thank you for the donations as well. And we'll put them to good use as well. So just wanted to let you know that we heard from so many of you. Thank you so much. And today's topic is something that I was intuitively really guided to talk about, because I wanted to talk about this mineral, this master nutrient. But at the same time, I thought, well, I don't want to approach this like any old, this nutrient's great for you, and this is why, X, Y, and Z, because you could Google that all day long if you like. So I was just kind of sitting with it. And this is when my inner wisdom said, you realize that you need to talk about this. And it's a mineral, and many of you might have guessed it. We're going to talk about magnesium today, and the importance of the magnesium. But my inner wisdom was saying that the quality of the magnesium is both strong and flexible. And it's something that creates bridges between different minerals and vitamins. And it's fourth most readily used and abundant minerals in the body. That's magnesium. And it's used for 300 plus different enzymatic reactions in the bodies. If you didn't have magnesium, your life would be pretty miserable, and you probably won't be on this earth. So it is extremely important. But the qualities that I was getting really attracted to is the fact that the magnesium is got the strength and the flexibility, and has a little bit of a feminine quality. So calcium, you can kind of see that the calcium is a little bit more masculine. It's got strength. It's got kind of the strong, bold statements, and it's somewhat rigid. But when the magnesium comes in, it softens up the calcium and the masculine energy as well, because without magnesium, you don't actually absorb calcium, as many of you know. And so magnesium is flexible, but it's not brittle like calcium is. And when we work with clients that have a lot of calcium walls, when we do their hair test and we see a high calcium coming up, or they have this incredible amount of calcium in their tissues, that means they've been building up and building up these boundaries. I see it as like a rigid, but yet brittle boundaries where you want to say no, but you're afraid that that is going to break you or make you fragile. So you are unable to say it. Or a lot of people that we work with that have a high level of calcium, they feel like they are not being understood from the outside world, or they're calling on their angels and guides and their intuition, but they're starting to feel like they can't get in touch with that. They feel like they've lost that connection that they used to have. So when you have too much calcium, those are the things, the rigidity, the brittleness, and the boundaries that are not quite healthy is going to start to build up. This is where the magnesium's power is extremely important, because the magnesium will soften up that part of the calcium and get reabsorbed, and you can break down these walls. And another thing that I can say about the calcium wall is that when you're behind this shell of calcium, you feel like you live inside like a silo. So your intuition, your vision, your imagination, and your creativity are not being expressed, but also not being heard. But what makes your inner creativity, your inner visions being seen and heard is actually the magnesium. And so I feel like we're at the liminal time in history where we don't really know what's working and what's not working, and we're all bickering with each other, and the world is just pulling each other apart. And inside you, when you feel that, this is when I think it's helpful to come back to a softening, yet strong and flexible and lightweight. It's not very heavy. Magnesium is not very heavy and dense, but to bring that back into your bodies a little bit more, that will lead you to a flow. Magnesium creates a very light flow, not like a river that is, snow melt or this torrential rain kind of a flow, but it's a very gentle and healthy flow. That's what comes back into the body when you take magnesium. So I think of animals like gazelle. When I was in Africa for a long time, I would see these gazelles that just like jumping like this, and a beautiful sight. They're strong and but they're flexible, they're muscular, but there's this feminine quality. So that's kind of what the magnesium does. And I wanted to bring that energy into this conversation, because when you have low magnesium, of course, you're going to experience like fatigue and depression and consistently worrying about things, the anxieties, lethargy, and then you feel like highly strung up, and buzzing, and you get hot-tempered and irritable, muscle cramps, even asthma, heart issues. Many of you know the magnesium is a key mineral if you have heart issues, because the muscles that squeeze and tighten, that's often associated with calcium. But when the muscles soften up, so think of the heartbeat, think of the heart motions, that is also, you involve the magnesium in that. So it's the softening, but it's not softened to the point that you're wilted and you're just like melting down. But it's the nice movements of the athletes would have, with their swimmers would have with their muscles, right? They're strong, but they're very flexible. So that's what magnesiums do. But when you don't have that, and so many people, according to many different, some people say 50% of the most world population, particularly in Western societies, were low on magnesium. But some other articles I read, it's actually 75% of the Americans, North Americans, so that includes Canadians as well, are low on magnesium. And so those are the things that will come up. And many of you know the leg cramps in the middle of the night, you do need to look at magnesium. But I mentioned last week that you may need to look at the potassium also. A lot of the heart disease is a big issue. Mental health is a big issue, because magnesium is actually, it's something that minerals that really help you to produce a neurotransmitter called GABA. And a GABA is really important for women, by the way. Women really need GABA. That's why sometimes I make the GABA rice, right? And if you're interested in the GABA rice, you can get them on Amazon, and you could look it up on our website under resources, and then you'll find our GABA rice that we use. But GABA soothes our nervous system. It's very soothing to our inner being and the nervous system, but also GABA promotes our sleep. And I know men have sleep issues too, but I often work with women, and from the clientele that I have, the struggling with sleep, they're mostly women. And we are probably, women, I suspect, maybe lose more magnesium than men. I don't know. I have not done actual scientific studies to look it up to see if women lose more magnesium, but that's what I see more often than not. Let me see. Let me think about some other ones, and then I can. Oh, and I wanted to say that when the magnesium level is balanced, you're a lot more open to discussions. You're a lot more open to communities. You're a lot more open to exchanging thoughts. And even though you may not completely agree with that person's ideas, you are willing to soften up towards that and still have a firmness within you too. So, and then people who have good amount of magnesium, they're generally cheerful people. They know how to find small moments of joy in their lives. And, when I work with clients, I can tell if this person is not having enough magnesium the moment I hear their voice, or the moment how they show up onto the screen. So maybe this is another way to take a look. It's like, do I have a natural joyfulness in me, or do I have to muster that up? And it's exhausting for me to be cheerful. And, I'm not a huge fan of like happy for no reason kind of thing, or so many books have been written for happiness, right? Do this and you'll be happy, happy for life, happy this, happy. No, I'm not a fan of that. There will be moments of sorrows. There will be moments of despairs. There will be moments that you will be angry. You will feel like you want to speak up, and it's not coming from a happy place. So I'm not looking for continuous happiness. But if you have to wake up and feel like you got to bring the brightness in you just to kind of get the energy to do that, you might need to look at the magnesium level and say, maybe I am losing my magnesium. Maybe I'll try some magnesium at bedtime. And that leads me to, maybe look into always taking magnesium on an empty stomach. And Chris can probably go into it a little bit as well, but empty stomach away from food. Otherwise, the magnesium actually becomes like soap-like substance, and they get kind of a cruddy or like sticky, they just don't really get absorbed in you. So always choose to take magnesium away from foods. And a couple more things about magnesiums, like maybe their qualities or personalities, I would say. They are very shiny, right? They're shiny minerals. So do you have your inner shine? Have you lost the inner light in you? Do you feel like it's like the mirror inside you needs a little wiping down? Or, there's a Sufi concept that Chris shares with me a lot, is there's always shininess underneath all that dust. We are all perfect underneath all that dust. So it's not that we're trying to become this or that, or where's my perfection, but do you have energy enough to remove the dust? Or you're having to remove the dust constantly. That's exhausting you. That's when your inner shine, your inner brightness has a little bit of film over. Then you may want to look into magnesium. And I would say, since 75%, and some articles say 75% of people in the Western societies, particularly in the United States, are low on magnesium, then we're missing a lot of these qualities. And magnesium is very much depleted in our diet as well. So I'll pass it to Chris.
Wow, that was That was a lot to follow on. So I'm going to add a couple more tidbits to that, which have to do with what magnesium does on a functional level that's really essential when it comes to energy. And this is something that, like Masami mentioned, magnesium, she called it the shine or the shiny mineral, but it's a very energy rich mineral. It's a very high energy substance. And that's both in terms of if you were to burn magnesium, like if any of you have ever used it to start a campfire, there are sometimes little kits that have magnesium that you shave off and start. It burns very hot, very bright. And that's what it does in our cells. It also builds in our bones. So, Masami mentioned how magnesium works so closely with calcium, and it does that in our bones as well. So there's this trade-off between that rigid hardness of calcium and the flexibility and the softening quality of magnesium that allows our bones to be both hard and flexible. And so I wanted to mention one thing in particular, and it came to our attention just in the last week or so, because there was a really interesting report that came out on a study that was the first of its kind, really, at least in terms of the scale. But there was a research group it was an international research group, and they took a high-powered supercomputer and they programmed it with an AI platform to do a machine learning overview of the entire open source database of COVID research that's been produced to date. And there's a global database on that. And so this machine learning program, if you want to call it that, it seems that's not quite a big enough name for it, but it went through and it looked in very high speeds. It looked through all of these 240,000 research studies that have been done to date in a relatively short period of time. So in scanning through it, what the researchers asked it to look for were patterns about the mechanism of infection for COVID, and then also what were the underlying predispositions or the factors of what led to infection. And interestingly enough, it kicked out all of the things that they asked for. It showed the pathway to infection. And when it came down to saying what the main causes were, or how the infection was, how we're susceptible to it, what the answer was in several different aspects was it was from disrupted blood sugar levels. And this is something that we see with other viral infections. But what's so important about this is that everything that the evidence was pointing to is that the severity of infection had everything to do with our blood sugar. And magnesium has everything to do with keeping that blood sugar balanced. That's also one of its big jobs. And what magnesium does, the mechanism it has, is it works inside of the cell to help to convert blood sugar, which is glucose, into the energy of the cell. And for those of you that are a little bit familiar, it's called ATP inside of the cell. So the cell actually makes a molecule of energy, which can then be used to fuel its systems and to keep the body as a whole moving. So magnesium gets used in very, very high levels to burn this sugar down into energy. And there's a burn rate that we can see, and it's anywhere between 28 to 56 atoms of magnesium to burn one molecule of glucose. So if you imagine every time you get in stress, that's a blood sugar reaction, because your stress hormones are telling your body to elevate blood sugar so that you have enough energy to meet the emergency response that's needed. That means that you're putting a demand on your entire system, virtually every cell of your body, in terms of magnesium demand. Okay, so stress elevates blood sugar elevates the requirement your body has for magnesium. And this is just one of its many functions, but this is a vital function. And again, 240,000 research studies that were skimmed and scanned through by this machine learning process all came down to this one major factor being the determinant of how severe our illness could be. And it's not just for COVID, but this is just one class of viruses. It could be from flu, it could be from other things that are inflammatory to our bodies. So this is a really important function, and again, highlights how important it is. And something that we'll get to here in just a minute is talking about some different kinds of magnesium that you can look at. And one of the things I want to highlight is, just as calcium is the sort of hardening or holding fast kind of quality, magnesium is the loosening and letting go and flexible quality. And that's basically how they work in your bowels in a lot of ways too. So we want to be careful about which kind you use, because certain kinds are really going to reinforce the speed that your bowels can either take them in or not. So that's something we're going to touch on. So I'll hand it back to Masami for a minute.
Yeah, I wanted to say briefly about we will go over a couple different kinds of magnesiums, because I think that'll be very interesting for all of you. But the topic of boundaries, so just kind of tune into yourself even after this call and say, what's been going on with my boundaries? Am I too flexible with it, or am I too rigid with it? Right? So usually we go into this, the porous boundaries or too rigid, the boundaries. And oftentimes we go back and forth, depending on the situations, depending on who you're with. Some people say some people I say yes to too much. And for some people, I'm like, no, so I kind of go back and forth as well. But this is when you may want to sit and say, you know what, this week I have been really rigid with that. Or I have been so uncomfortable being open to it and receiving their people's help, or maybe reaching out to people. Maybe that's an internal boundaries are getting a little too rigid. Then you might need to say, okay, I'm going to work on taking a little extra magnesium tonight. So again, this is worth reporting, reporting or repeating, is that make sure you're not taking magnesium with food. Please don't do that. I work with a lot of clients that have been given magnesiums from working with whoever they've been, and they've been taking magnesium with food. And it's just one of the worst things you can do to the body. So please don't do that. Okay. And then let's say if you're becoming like a little too flexible, you're starting to feel overwhelmed by all these things that you've said yes to, or all these things that you have to reply, and you're starting to feel totally porous, and you're starting to feel like everything is coming at you, everything, no filters. And you just feel like a Swiss cheese, walking around Swiss cheese, and you need to convert back to the cheddar cheese. Then you may need to do, just say, okay, I need to maybe pull back on the magnesium a little bit, maybe do other things that will support the magnesium absorption, and maybe not do so much magnesium. Okay, so you got to go in and out, in and out. And, nothing exists in its own individual things, right? So we've talked about this. We are a holistic being. That means supplements are holistic, foods are holistic. What happens in Haiti impacts us too. So we really need to look at our microscopic level minerals and all that macronutrients, micronutrients through the same lens. So your magnesium gets supported by fat soluble vitamins. So vitamin D, E, K, and A. They support the absorption and vice versa. So supports the absorption of magnesium, but the magnesium also help with the vitamin D, E, A, and K. So when I work with clients and they say, I did the blood test and then my vitamin D is low, so I'm just going to take, 50,000 IUs of, vitamin D. And I come to find out this person is not taking anything else except for this crazy amount of vitamin D. Well, that's not going to, first of all, help, because your liver might not be able to process that fat soluble vitamin like vitamin D very well. But also you might have a low magnesium, right? So please stop this thinking that there's a symptom and there's a one silver bullet solution to this. There's no such thing. Okay. There's no such thing. You really want to filter your life through that idea and say, what is connected? If I tug at this point of the spider web, what is going to respond on the other end of it? And then also B6 is very, very important for magnesium. And as many of you know now, potassium and magnesium are best friends. So they like to hang out together. So taking those together around the same time will be very beneficial as well. And there are other ones too, but the zinc actually has a pretty good relationship with magnesium too. So all the ones that we've been talking about so far, they are actually synergistic to one another. Not all things are synergistic, by the way, okay? But they are. And vitamin C also as well.
Can I jump in for a second? I want to reiterate something that you said earlier about when to take magnesium and that process. If you take it with meals, we've had people that got into the habit of taking supplements with meals, and magnesium will mix with your fats. This is what Masami was talking about earlier. It's this process that's called saponification, and it does literally create a soapy-like substance when you have magnesium with foods that have fatty acids in them, which is most foods. So the best time to take it is before bedtime and away from food. Preferably your stomach is mostly empty by that point. So if you're observing that rule of not eating for 3 or even 4 hours before you sleep, and then you take your magnesium soon before you go to sleep, you should be in good shape. And there's a question in the chat about getting magnesium from food, and that's a really important question. And you would think, well, why aren't we really emphasizing that? It is true, and we can name a few foods that are higher in magnesium, but here's the reality of the time that we live in, is there have been soil studies that have been done in England and in the US for the last century or more. In the UK, the studies go back into the 1800s. And what they show is that there's been, as we have shifted our agricultural practices to these high yield and kind of, what do they call them? The nitrogen and phosphate-based fertilizers. That has completely changed the process of farming, and we don't get the return of minerals back into the soil from decomposing crops like we used to. There's just a complete change. So over the last 100+ years, the levels of many of the nutrients in our foods, like magnesium, the minerals in particular, have really dropped over the last century. And so the sad irony of this is that even though you can eat things like your green, leafy greens, and we highly recommend that you eat these things, avocados, nuts, seeds are good, tofu, some of those things, you can find these very easily online, high magnesium foods. The fact is, in terms of calories, just quantities, you would have to eat lots. We're talking like a 6,000, 8,000 calorie intake of these really high magnesium, relatively high magnesium foods just to get what your body requires. So in other words, you're creating another problem for your body in the form of too many nutrients coming in. And that leads to other metabolic issues. So the easiest way to offset this challenge, while at the same time not saying you shouldn't eat good, healthy, whole food, yes, you should. Get as nutrient dense of food into your body as you can. And also consider supplementing, because these days we generally need that to reach the levels that our body requires.
And, with the food also, but you will have to supplement magnesium. I just know that just by doing the magnesium through the foods, like Chris said, you'll have to be eating buckets of foods. I can't exactly remember what the ratio was, but the one apple nutrients that you used to get from one apple in like a 1930s, 40s, even up to 50s, you have to eat at least 5 to 6 apples to get the same nutrients that you used to get from one apple. So that's how much the soil's depleted. So you have to put the nutrients back into this soil, right, through the supplementation. And A lot of the vegetables and, vegetarian based diets will have magnesium, but the problem with it is that you're not getting the particular kind of magnesium called magnesium taurinate. I don't know why my throat's hurting, so I might have to give it to Chris, but
let me take over for just a second. I'm going to address the question in the chat. Cheryl, the question that Cheryl put up was about having a little bit of something to eat before going to sleep, and then she's taking magnesium first thing in the morning because of that. So that's fine that you're doing it that way. That would still be on an empty stomach to take it in the morning. And I just want to remind you of the reason functionally why you got that bit of advice. And that is because if you're somebody that is struggling to keep your energy levels at the functional level that they need to be, and to be able to have energy through the night to do the restorative repair work and the clean out work in your brain and all of that, you might be somebody who benefits from a little bit of food before you go to bed. We don't make this recommendation lightly or to everybody. This is really just for people that are having some of the specific sleep disruption issues that are chronic. And so, and generally what will happen is as your body restores its energy, you'll get back to a place where you don't really need to do that. And you can just keep your normal eating time to within about 8 hours a day.
So this is where Cheryl, it's step by step process when you work with us, is that taking magnesium at nighttime is, in general, it's fabulous for sleep, particularly the type of magnesium that I hope I can say it because it's a long word and Chris can probably type it up there, but magnesium glycerophosphate. And we will post all those supplements, the magnesiums that we take on the store. So if you want to look at it for a reference or order or whatever, that's fine. But magnesium glycerophosphate is the form that you want to use if you're having sleep issues. Okay. But, blood sugar issues is the biggest issue for most people. Like Chris said, 240,000 studies on COVID shows one common cause for severe expressions of COVID, and that's blood sugar dysregulation. So is taking magnesium at night more important than addressing the blood sugar? I would say address the blood sugar first. So taking the magnesium in the morning away from food would work. Okay. And I put it on the chat there, but magnesium taurinate is what I was about to say when I choked. Okay. So magnesium taurinate works really well with vegetarians. Okay. It's the type of magnesium that's somewhat lacking in just the foods you're eating. And it helps with the cataracts issues. So I get this email a lot. I have eye issues, or, I have this going on in my vision and I have to get the cataracts surgery done. And I say, well, there are a lot of things you can actually do. And one of the reasons why you're having eye issues is the calcification of the body. So in order to remove the calcifications, or at least slow down the calcifications of your body, we have to do magnesium, right? So I would do the magnesium taurinate if you're having a calcification symptoms, which also includes the hypertension, right? So hypertension, cataracts, and also thinning, if you have the need to thin the bile, which almost all of us do, but that's another day of story, right? To support your liver and gallbladder, magnesium taurinate might be a good choice for you. And then Chris can maybe tell the other one, the Orotate one.
Yeah, Orotates. We mentioned zinc orotate last week. And so Orotates are very small molecules that are able to enter into the cell easily. So when you take Orotates, you're going to have, they're also good because they're not generally as disruptive to the intestinal lining. So you're less likely to have loose bowels as a result of that. So if you're somebody who tends to have that, this is also a good form that's highly absorbable. And one of the things with Orotates also is you tend to get more of the elemental magnesium. So just the plain atomic magnesium into your cells with Orotate more directly. With other ones, it has to take a few other pathways to get there. So it can help with increasing the absorption if you are finding that you're having difficulty or your bowels are very sensitive to magnesium. So you want to treat your magnesium dosing like a dial. So if you're finding that you're reaching what's called bowel tolerance, then you're going to start seeing that loosening effect. And that means you need to back off, probably by one number of the capsules usually that you would find those in. So if you were taking 3 capsules and that made you have loose bowels, you should try 2 capsules for a while until you can build up that tolerance. Okay.
Please recommend magnesium orotate to people that have been diagnosed with the MS or the symptoms of the nerves, and maybe the brain issues are starting to show up. Orotate is great. If you're recovering from heart attacks or of somebody, please recommend Orotate. Or if you're going into heart surgery, it's very good to take Orotate form. If you've been dealing with a viral load, so it could be after tick bites, or it could be Epstein-Barr, or some other, maybe even shingles. Also, I would say even after vaccinations, or you are long COVID, you may want to do the magnesium orotate, because that's going to be a lot more helpful in terms of the viral expressions. And for muscle aches and pains and cramps. And like Chris said, it's really good to take Orotate if your bowels are kind of sensitive and you tend to be more on the looser stool person. That's actually a better form to take. And it has been shown to help with your muscle toning. So like you don't get cramps, right? So that your athleticism, maybe your speed, in walking can get better, or if you're a runner, that can, to support your performance with that to do magnesium orotate. But the key is I switch them around. I'm constantly switching them around. And just depending on what my needs are, I do about 2 to 3 weeks on one and then switch it over to something else, just so that I can address the whole system instead of getting too locked into one thing. And, the time is coming up. Chris, I'm sure you have something to share, but I wanted to actually share about the story about the little boys. Are we okay with that? Or do you have anything else to add?
I'll save it for after if it still applies.
No, just share it.
Okay. Well, this was just a thought that came up earlier when you were talking about happiness. And, to me, if you look at the word happiness, it actually is related to the word happen in English. And it's a very transient thing because it depends on what's going on. It's very much connected to circumstances. And so I just wanted to make that analogy with how we are nourishing our bodies and our minds through our bodies. And that if we are sustaining them and we're keeping our mineral balance up where it needs to be, and we're supporting our immune systems where they need to be, I think that's where we get to tap into the renewable resources of our system. And I think that's where joy comes from. And that's something that we really need to be able to tap into right now, not wait and hope that something will make us happy from the circumstances going on. Because honestly, right now, that might be a big ask, but we can generate it from within. And I think that's behind what we're talking about. And I don't want to lose sight of that either. So that's all I had to say.
Yeah. And we wanted to just kind of share this quick story about years ago when we started to really recognize that the nutrition is such a key to the person's happiness, potential, and soul expression. Was that I have so many examples like this, but these 2 boys were really profound in my life. I mean, I have so many, but this one boy, the mother reached out to me and said to me, I think he was 3 years old. Yeah. He got kicked out of preschools. She said that he's been kicked out of preschools 5 times already. and he was put into anger management classes, and he's been going to see all these people to try to work with his anger. And he was a very rambunctious kind of kid, and so I said, okay, well, why don't we do the hair tissue on him? So that would be the quickest way to figure out what's going on. So I did a hair tissue on him, and I saw that he was extremely low on zinc. And I could see that he could use a lot more fats in his diet. And a little more sodium. So I asked the mom, I said, what does he eat? And, it's kind of a low fat diet and low salt diet and things like that. So I had them, this is when I used to see the clients. So she came with her son and her daughter, and I was going to have them come into my home office, but I quickly realized that if I let this kid inside my house, this kid was going to destroy our house. Like literally everything was going to be shattered by the time he left. Because it's true. He was ready to start to push everything, all the furnitures. He was ready to climb everything. So I said, okay, quickly, kids. I watched these kids, like the sister and the brother both, but the brother was crazy, jumping on the furniture. So I said, come on, kids, let's go outside. So I actually did the session outside in our front yard. And I said, kids, just stay around here. And I got 2 glasses of water, and it was for the boy, but I brought it for the sister too. And the mom was sitting with Chris, and then she's just going, I just don't know what to do. He just gets kicked out of the preschools. I don't know what to do with this kid. So I come out with sliced up cold butter that I sliced them up in cubes. And I got a little jar of sea salt. And then I brought them outside, and I said, come on, kids, let's sit down on this ground and let's have a little party here with the butter and the sea salt. So I had them slowly put that 1 cube of the butter in their mouths. And only one rule. I said, the rule is you got to let the butter melt in your mouth. You can't have another one till you let it completely melt and you swallow. And however much sea salt you'd like to add to that is up to you. And so I had them do this, and the mom and Chris were sitting back there, and I purposely did not look at the mom because I wanted to engage with the boy. And then I don't know, how long did it take, Chris? I don't even know, that the time kind of warped into something else at that moment.
The sister ended up going and just sitting quietly somewhere in the yard and just found a rock or something really interesting. And she just was still and very calm. And then the boy, it was probably within, I would say, 5 to 7 minutes is how it happened.
So I'm a total stranger to this boy. He comes over and he gives me a big hug. We're on the floor, on the ground, on the earthing. And then he just holds me, and he started to rock himself like this. And then I'm just like, oh, so I'm like this sweet little kid. So we're just both rocking with each other. And I had no idea what was going on in the background, but this is when Chris told me. Do you want to say?
Yeah. And I want to just go back to what you said earlier. When these kids arrived, I think I said there's no way they're coming inside, because they were tearing up even our front yard. They were ripping grass out of the ground and knocking over
No, Chris, they did come in. Remember that our giant,
but it's just like
they did come in, and we had the very exercise briefly. Ball, and they threw that ball down the stairs and was ripping our artwork. Remember?
I remember. And it was so with that kind of energy, it took a matter of just a few minutes of getting the nutrients into the body and having this little boy's brain feel what it's like to have enough. That's what we were watching happen. As soon as, when they first started, they wanted to just grab, but Masami kept them to the rules. And so they sucked on it. And that was probably a new thing for them to really feel it. It didn't take very long at all. This was just a few minutes for that transition in their nervous systems to happen. And when the boy, he took a little bit longer, but when he hit that point where he came over and started hugging and rocking with Masami and sitting on her lap, I had been talking to the mother, and she was distracted by me somewhat deliberately. But when she looked over and saw that, she just burst into tears. And she said, I can't believe it. This is what I see. This is the little boy that I know, that nobody else sees. And now you get to see him too. And this is the first time anyone's ever been able to see this but me. And so that really hit home for her and for us again, just how powerful these things that are so simple, so basic to our bodies also are to our lives. They're profound when it comes to finding that depth of energy and experience that we can draw from. So,
yeah. And I think that's what keeps us going in what we do, because when you give your body the nutrients that it's been craving for, it's been hungry for, it will begin so quickly for little kids because they're so little. They respond so easily. And around that age is so much fun to work with because there's nothing that's holding them back. You know, there's no judgment. They're not trying to filter through all kinds of scientific knowledge, but they're just so open to it. But, you know, I'm just giving you this example because the magnesium, the hydration, the potassium, the zinc, these are basic minerals that can actually give you that sense of exhale, the sense of, wow, I am being held by the universe. I am okay. I am enough. So I hope you can feel that joy that we both felt from doing this kind of work. And this is just one of the examples, and we'll tell you another example maybe next week. But this can happen, and it may look like a miracle, but what we just did was we grounded him and we had him eat the fats and sea salt that it's full of minerals, and hydrated this kid. That's all I did. So really remember that the body is actually simple. Body requires simple steps many times. Simple steps many times. So please attend to who you are and your soul and connect with your spirit. Okay. Thank you for letting us go a little bit longer. It's fun to share these stories with all of you. So thank you, everyone. And we will see you next week, next Monday. And then we'll be sending you this email about the spirit and soul bridging workshop, or maybe retreat is what we're thinking about doing. So talk to you soon.